What up, reader fam? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're getting spicy! I really enjoy hearing negative thoughts about my favorite books because I recognize the fact that just because I love a book, it does not mean it's perfect. Absolutely not. Nope. Favorite book does not equal perfection. Loving a book means that you accept it even if it has a ton of flaws. So I thought that today I would pinpoint some of my negative thoughts on some of my favorite books and just talk about some things within my favorite books that I kinda hate. Things I would not have minded being edited out. Chop chop. Things that I probably could have done without, but I can overlook it because of my love for everything else within the story. Oh, big ol' sneeze. I hate sneezing during this pandemic because people are like, Corona! I put a lot of my favorite books on slips of paper. I'ma pull the titles at random and see if I can pinpoint some negativity. I feel like this is probably gonna be hard, but also maybe not. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We'll see just how critical I can be of my favorite things. Without further ado, let's get started. Here we go. This one. A series of unfortunate events. Oh ho 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 ho. Wapa. This series is about these three kids, the Baudelaire orphans. Their parents die and they have this guy named Count Olaf who is chasing after them to try to get their fortune. It's pretty unfortunate. Boy oh boy do I actually have a critique for this. This is a series that I love because of nostalgic reasons and also because of the content. Like obviously it's great. The writing is so great, so sarcastic and wonderful. All the characters are eccentric and interesting and just bring so much to the table, but despite all of that greatness, I have some negative thoughts about the series as a whole. The major one though was the ending. What even was that ending? It wasn't an ending, that's what it was. It lays out a million questions throughout the series. And then we get to the end and we're like, oh, here we go and get the questions answered, and guess what happens? None of the questions get answered. Mr. Lemony Snicket's like, I'm not gonna tell you nothing. In fact, you're gonna have to read the Beatrice letters, an extra book that I'm gonna drop if you're wanting some closure. Keyword, some closure. Not full-on closure, just some closure. You want full closure? Sorry. And yet I still love this series despite its lazy conclusion. Next up, ooh, Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This book is about a boy who is on his way to avenge his brother's death. He hops on an elevator, and when he's on this elevator, all these different people get on that have passed on that connect to his brother in some way. This is really one that's going to be a struggle for me to find anything negative to say about it because I look at this book and I'm like, this is a masterpiece. It's been hard to find other books that compare to this book, at least books written in verse. Like, I've yet to find a book that's done it like this book in terms of the format. The one little thing, like the little itty bitty thing that comes to mind when I think of any kind of critique that I have is maybe, just maybe, it could have been like 50 pages longer. And I wouldn't have been mad about it. Don't mind me just gonna sit here and ponder what 50 more pages of this book would have done to me. It already destroyed me, so that would have been a stomp on my destroyed self. But truly, it's a book that's like really close to perfection in my opinion, and I know that it's like reaching to be like, oh, the critique I have is I wanted 50 more pages, but like, I genuinely can't think of any other negative thing that I would point out. Like, I love it. It's great. I guess I could also say that it's a little hard to like fully get to know our characters within this format, within the verse format. But even that, like, I felt like each character was shaped out really well, especially because we get kind of little bits of their past. So I'm just gonna say, I wish there would have been 50 more pages. I'm just saying though, if any book had the potential to reach perfection, I'm thinking it would be this one. Next up, we've got this bad boy. Who's it gonna be? Percy Jackson. Oh snap. Not so sure about Bad Boy as the title of that. Maybe, Waterboy. Yeah. Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. My normal Percy Jackson copy is too hard to get to right now, so we're gonna go with the illustrated edition. Ooh, it's beautiful. This story is about a boy who one day finds out that his father is Poseidon, and as you can imagine, that kind of changes his life completely. He's thrust into this whole new world that he never knew about before. I feel like my critique of the series might hurt some feelings, so I'm sorry, but listen, Grover and I did not vibe. We did not vibe. Right off the bat, that is. I did grow to love Grover's character, and I do think that he is a very important character. Like, obviously he was a vital role in Percy's life, but I was so annoyed at him in the first few books. I was like, bruh, I'ma yeet you out this book and carry on without you. I know his importance, I know that he is a full-on solid rock in Percy's life, but he was annoying as heck to me. Thankfully not annoying enough for me to yeet these books out of my life and never read them, but I was getting close to hitting that point, let me tell you. Next. Ooh, Legend by Marie Lu. Legend takes place in a dystopian world, and we follow two very different characters. One is a wanted criminal named Day, and then we follow June, who is a prodigy set on the path of success. I honestly feel like the biggest critique that I have for this book is the characters' ages, because they did not feel like 15 to me. They feel like full-on 20-year-olds gallivanting around. Now, I'm not saying that 15-year-olds aren't able to tackle big issues within a government, because hello, that happens in today's day and age, and it's amazing. We love to see it. Keep doing what you're doing, Gen Z. But what I'm saying is, both through the dialogue and their actions, they did not feel like 15-year-olds to me. Maybe 20-year-olds stuck in 15-year-old bodies? Ooh, is that a conspiracy theory I'm sniffing? Another issue that I have is the relationship, because it is rushed. It's the insta-love for me. Someone grabbed that love remote and pressed fast forward. I do love this book though, and I feel like Marie Lu's writing style is just cinematic. Like, talk about a writing style where as you read it, it's being translated into a film inside your head. It is a wild experience. Next. Ooh, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. This is the story of a boy who goes on an adventure to unlock the past of his grandfather, and in doing so, he meets a bunch of peculiar children, and together they all go on a wild adventure. I knew it was coming. It has arrived. My favorite book of all time. Surprisingly though, it's not hard for me to pick out something that I don't like about this book. I know that normally I'm like, this book came into my life, ripped out my heart, buried it, unburied it, resurrected it, and stuck it back in me, and now here I am. But the truth of the matter is, it ain't perfect. Nobody's perfect. I gotta work it again and again till I get it right. Hannah Montana has left the chat. There's actually a very specific scene in this book that I feel like could have been cut, even though it is a little bit important. And I promise you it's not a spoiler at all, but it's when Jacob has those two random boys take him to the Miss Peregrine's house. That whole scene is just so slow, and sure, it is kind of funny because the boys themselves are ridiculous. That rap scene though, spitting some unexpected bars. It just slows down the pacing because of what ends up happening with that scene. We move in slow motion, and every time I get to it, when I reread it, I have to like mentally prepare myself for it. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're gonna slow on down here. Are we out of the woods? Yet are we out of the woods? Yet are we out of the woods? Another issue that I have to this day, even though I've gotten kind of used to it, is the pairing that ends up happening, like the main pairing. Y'all know what I'm talking about if you've read this book. It's still super uncomfortable for me to this day. I remember when I first read about it, I was like, what is this? This is uncomfy. Tell me this is not happening, but it's happening. Like, I don't really enjoy the series as a whole for the romance itself, but I'm still like, this is very weird, and that's saying a lot for a book that has a boy who is able to put a heart in dolls and make them come to life. Anyway, those are my critiques. I still obviously love everything else about this book. It's amazing, and y'all should read it, as if I haven't ever said that ever. I feel like on my deathbed I'll still even be recommending this book. Next, The Astonishing Color of After. This is the story of a girl who has convinced herself that her mother has transformed into a bird after her death by suicide. So we follow our main character who is chasing down this bird, trying to find out the truth, while in the process uncovering a lot about her mother's past. I love this book, and even I know it could have been cut like maybe 100 pages, maybe even more than that. Like, dare I say 150 pages could have been chopped. It could have 100% been condensed. Take that book sandwich and flatten it a bit. Also, while I didn't mind the romance in it, I'm not really sure what it added to the story. And I know that I'm a little harsh when it comes to romance in books. I'm sorry that I'm that way, but also I'm not sorry. But I genuinely feel like this is a book that could have solely focused on the emotional journey of our main character and kicked that romance to the curb. In some ways, I do feel like it does help shape out our character a little bit more and show a different side to her, but it felt like just such a big detour outside of our main focus, and the main plot point was so much more interesting than the romance. Anyway, this book was a major heartbreaker, and I do recommend it, especially if you're somebody who likes contemporary with just a touch of magic. This might be right up your alley. Next, The Hunger Games. Classic. This book is about a girl named Katniss, and it takes place in a dystopian world where every year these kids must fight for the death in a game called the Hunger Games. It's honestly been so long since I've read the Hunger Games that I feel like it's gonna be hard for me to pinpoint what I don't like about them. And I know that I just ranted about romances, but I feel like that's the biggest issue that I had with these books. Mostly the fact that the love triangle didn't even need to happen. Like, I felt like personally it was very clear who she was going to end up with at the beginning of the story, story. So the whole Peeta versus Gale thing was a firm pass for me. Though to be fair, I feel that way with every love triangle I read about. Like, I feel like I'm always like, oh, duh, they're gonna end up with that person, so there's no real reason to get caught up in this person versus this person. Who are they gonna pick? When it's very clear, the road is very clear as to who they're gonna pick. So is this me being a love triangle anti? Potentially. Also, just saying, but the romance should have been the least of our worries, because, you know, the whole world was basically on fire and everybody's relying on Katniss to, like, come through and help them out. Like, let's get justice and then we can have Katniss sort out who passes the romance vibe check. Next up, the book thief. Ho 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 ho. Zippity doo dah. It's the year 1939 in Nazi Germany, and we are seeing through the eyes of death. Through the eyes of death, we see the story of Liesel, whose family has taken in a Jew to hide in their basement. I do love this book. I feel like I have to keep reiterating that, like I have to keep validating the fact that I love these books, even though I'm pointing out their flaws and things that I don't like about them. I promise you I love it though, it's great, it's one of my favorites. I just don't want to come across as a fake fan. I felt like this was kind of a book that just moved in slow motion. I'd sit down, read it for 2 hours, and then look how many pages I'd read, and I'd only read like 40 pages. And it would convince me that I had gone down a few levels in terms of reading speed. But no, it's just the pacing. The pacing overall really is sluggish. Like, it is so slow. Slow. And that can definitely be a negative thing depending on what you're in the mood for. Like, if you're reading a slow book, but you're in the mood for a fast-paced book, like, obviously that's not gonna work out. There's gonna be some friction there. It's also a book that doesn't have a lot going on necessarily. Like, it's not one that's like jam-packed with like crazy things happening left and right. It's more of a calm plot despite the stakes being pretty high. Obviously there are big heart-wrenching moments that occur, but it's one that's going to take its time to get to those moments. While I am pointing out these things as a negative, they didn't necessarily bother me that much when I was reading it. This was one that I just kind of enjoyed reading at my own pace, even if it did take me forever to read. Next up, watch out! Six of Crows! Ho 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 ho, ka ka ka! Six of Crows is the story of 6 misfits that come together to take on a heist. Is there anything about Six of Crows that I hate? Ka ka ka! Maybe pacing wise, there are a few times where it's like, okay y'all, let's giddy on up. But if we're being real, I feel that way about a lot of fantasy books that I read. You've got to factor in all these different things that it has to do in order to build the world in your mind. Like, they have to lay out the magic system, they have to lay out the world itself, they have to lay out the government, the characters, all these different things in order for it to click in the brainy to brain. It's not always going to be Speedy Gonzalez from the start. You know what? I feel like another thing that I could potentially critique, even though it didn't really bother me that much, but it is something just to kind of point out. I'm kind of reaching here, but I feel like the main plot point, it takes a long time to really get to that, and then when we get to that, it just kind of goes by really fast, and it's like, oh, okay, that was a lot of build up to this point, and now we've done the thing, and it's over, and it was really fast. But again, is that me reaching? You know it. I honestly have a hard time finding anything bad to say about this book because I love it so much. I kiss you because I love you, and then I wipe away my lip spit. Next, Truthwitch. Woo. How do I give a short synopsis for this book? Oh boy. So basically this takes place in a world where there are a bunch of different witches. And we follow 2 witches who are thread sisters, and they have found themselves in trouble with a blood witch. Somebody that if you were in this world you wouldn't want to mess with because he's brutal. And to make matters worse, there's a war on the horizon. I think something that was a bit of a turnoff for me in terms of this book is that some of the world building was just kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around. It's very much so overloaded with information. I would read parts of it and my mind would hit capacity and be like, set that book aside, I've reached my limit for the day. Mind you, the world is really interesting and it does keep you engaged, but it's just a lot. It's a bit overwhelming at times. For me, it was a lot of processing and rereading to make sure that I understood everything that was going on. There are so many different types of witches within the world that it's hard to keep track of each type of witch. Even though throughout the story we still only really follow a few, but it's still just hard to manage all of it. Next, Xenamia General Store. This book follows some boys who are on the run from the Popo, and they find themselves in an abandoned general store in the night and end up receiving these mysterious letters asking for advice. So they send off advice to these people, and they end up finding out that the advice that they are sending is to people from the past. Not gonna lie, I feel like I'm still reeling off the high of this book, so it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint something negative to say because I loved it so much, and it's more of a recent love for me. Like, I read it this past summer and I absolutely loved it, and I feel like I haven't reached reached that point where it's like fully sunk in and I haven't fully processed every bit of the story to know a negative thing to say about it. But I guess one thing that I could critique is that the characters are bad at giving advice. Like, they really are, but they're also really immature, so it makes sense that their advice would be bad. Some of the advice, they were like, get it together, dummy. And it's like, whoa, soften the blow a little bit. Be a little respectful, why don't ya? Respectful. Also, I feel like another little critique that I could pull out, that I could reach for, is that I felt like our main characters don't really get super fleshed out necessarily. It didn't really bother me because I feel like while they are our main characters, they're the ones that we follow and we see them writing letters to these people from the past. The people from the past are actually the ones that get fleshed out a lot and we learn so much about them. So I wasn't super bothered by that, but like, this video is about stating things that I don't like about books that I love, so here I am trying to find something to say, and I feel like I succeeded. I'm gonna need to reread it to give a well thought out critique, but that's all I got. I'm sorry. Next up, Cinder. Cinder is basically Cinderella meets sci-fi. We follow our main character Cinder, who is a cyborg, and she is a full-on mechanic. She kills the mechanic game. She's living with her stepmom and her stepsisters, and she ends up having an unexpected connection with Prince Kai, which brings more chaos to her world than she could ever imagine. It's been years since I've read this series, and I know for sure there are things within it that I really didn't like. Specifically, Scarlet and... Actually, is that a spoiler? That might be a spoiler. Scarlet's pairing. The pairing that ends up with Scarlet. I was not about that pairing. It was annoying. Insta-love. Bye-bye to that. I think another big critique that I often have for this series is the predictability. And not only in terms of it being a fairy tale retelling, so you know kind of how things end up, but the plot points outside of that kind of familiar fairy tale feeling are a bit predictable at times. Specifically, a lot of the things that happen in here and some of the things that happen in Scarlet as well, the second book. There's just that lack of being able to theorize because it's pretty easy to know what's gonna happen and what secrets are gonna be revealed. Again, that's mostly for the first two books in my opinion. There are some things that definitely surprised me later on in the series, but I think that that's a valid critique for me to have, is that I wish there would have been more surprising elements. Like, there's one specific reveal that really had no impact because it's pretty clear what exactly is going to be revealed when we first learn about this specific thing. Obviously, I gotta be vague because I don't want to spoil it for y'all. But overall, I really love this book. I love how adventurous it is, but I think the thing that I love the most is the characters. Like, they all just have such great, interesting personalities. Nobody feels similar to other characters. They all feel very distinct and different, and I love them, would die for them. They're amazing. Okay, I'm gonna do one more book because I feel like all this negativity is bringing me down. Here we go. The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery. Oh god, what am I even gonna say about that one? The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery follows a bookstore owner who has gone through a bit of adversity in his life, and a gift that is left with him ends up changing the course of his life forever. I don't know what negative thing to say about this one. Oh, this is hard. I can't really think of anything negative to say about this one because I love it so much, and I don't know if it's because I was so clouded with my love for it as I was reading it that I missed some negative things. So let me just think about this. Let me try to pull something out of my brain that I could say that's kind of negative about it. Oh wait, you know what? Actually, hold up, wait a minute. There was an aspect of our main character that I didn't like. Obviously, I'm somebody who loves unlikable characters, and so it wasn't like that big of an issue, but I still was like side-eyeing him because our main character is a bit of a book snob. Like, he works in a bookstore, he's around books all the live-long day, selling them, reading them, all that jazz. But he is a big book snob when it comes to YA, and that was annoying to read about, obviously, because clearly I love young adult books. I want to write a young adult book, and like, it's kind of frustrating to read about a character who's all like, I am above young adult books. YA is stupid. Adult books are superior. It's just like, okay man, you grump. You can feel that way, but you don't gotta be such a negative Nancy about it. But again, that's a part of his character, and I like seeing that. I like reading about characters who are completely different from me, who have different opinions on life, who have different opinions on books and media that they're consuming. Like, I enjoy reading about that because I feel like if we only read about characters who are like us, we're not learning about other ways of life and the different types of people that we could encounter in the real world. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm not gonna preach on this, but that was one negative thing, is like, me and him didn't necessarily vibe at the beginning of the book, but I still enjoyed reading about him and following his journey throughout the book. Okay, that's it for me pinpointing some negative things from some of my favorite books. I feel like a lot of this was just me kind of reaching for negative things and having a hard time to like pinpoint bits of these books that I don't like, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I want to hear from you guys down below in the comments comments, what's your favorite book, and is there anything within that book that you're not the biggest fan of? Let me know what that is. In some ways, I feel like this was therapeutic, and in other ways, I feel like I just drained all my energy by spewing all this negativity out of me. Hopefully this video didn't bring you down in any way. That was not the point of it. I just wanted to like showcase the fact that like just because you love a book doesn't mean it's perfect. You feel. Anyway, that's all that I have for you guys today. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye.